Episode 18 of the Consistency Podcast is here. My name is Steve from Gloucester. And before we get into the nuts and bolts of the episode, I would like to talk about a potential format change to the Consistency Podcast, and that involves bringing guests onto the show. Not every week, but maybe once or twice a month. I would love to have a 15 to 20 minute episode with some guests. I think it would be a great opportunity to talk to some guests about the Kirk Minahan show and things that they're interested in. And it would be a win-win because the guests will have the opportunity to promote things that they're interested in and things that they're working on. And it also gives me an opportunity to spruce up the Consistency Podcast a little bit. Having guests is something that I've been thinking about for a while, and now it's time to make it a reality. So if you're interested in coming on to the Consistency Podcast as a guest, please let me know. I would love to begin the booking process. And if you're somebody who is interested in producing and would like to produce these episodes, please get in touch with me. I would love to run some ideas by you to see if we can make this a reality. And if you decide to produce, I'll take care of you. There'll be an envelope so you won't have anything to worry about when it comes to that. So I do have a few people in mind as guests. I've reached out to them already to gauge their interest. And the one person who I hope will accept an invitation to come on to the show is Mutt. I'm a huge fan of his. I've always been since his days of WEEI. And I think having him on the show for 15 to 20 minutes would be amazing. I have been a supporter of him. I was a loyal listener of Mutt at Night, of Mutt and Merloni. I loved when he was on with Mikey Adams, when he was on with Jerry and Kirk. And, now I enjoy every episode that he's on KMS. I find him to be very funny, a good conversationalist. And I think having him on the Consistency Podcast would be gold. And I know that he's been very reluctant to come onto the network. He's turned down invitations in the past. So I don't expect him to accept my invitation, but it's there for him. And coming on to the Consistency Podcast would be a very soft landing spot for him. We're going to talk about the Kirk Minahan show, sports, gambling, and horse racing. These are things that he loves to talk about. These are topics that he's interested in. So hopefully he wants to come on and, give me 20 minutes of his time. I would appreciate that beyond words. But again, I know that this is something that he's not been interested in the past. He's turned people down, so I'm sure he's going to turn me down as well. And that's totally fine. I accept that. But maybe he will consider yes, knowing that we have worked together one time in the past. That was in November 2023, was when I was on the Kirk Minahan show with him. So he knows me just a little bit. So maybe that will help with his accepting this offer. But again, going by past history, I don't expect a yes from Mutt. But that doesn't stop the idea and my wanting to have guests on the show. So again, if you're interested in producing or being a guest, reach out because I would definitely like, to change the format up just a little bit going forward. I'm excited about the potential of the Consistency Podcast, and I'm looking forward to putting out some great episodes in 2024. What I'm not excited about, and I'm going to be diplomatic about this, is a potential name change to this show, which was proposed by the CEO of the network, Menners, on Twitter. He had said that he's thinking about changing the name of the show from the Consistency Podcast to the Inconsistency Podcast. And this comes on the heels of him contemplating a 1-week suspension of this show on the network based upon my latest episodes concerning Gussie Bullshit and his firing from the Kirk Minahan show. My thought and my feeling is that Menners, just like Kirk, felt like I was a little too lenient on Gus, and I didn't celebrate his firing. And they are entitled to their opinion, and there's nothing I can do with the fact that I didn't hammer him the way that Menners, Kirk, or anybody expected me to do. But again, that's just the way I operated towards the end. I really felt like I was piling on for a long time, and I just didn't have it in me to really hammer this kid when all was said and done. So because of that, because I took my foot off the gas a little bit, there's potentially going to be a name change to this show. And Menners, being the CEO, being the boss, he can do whatever he wants, and that's totally fine, and I'll accept that. But what I find it really hard to digest is that I wasn't given a heads up about this. I learned just like everybody else did when I listened to his podcast and when I went on to Twitter. And I found that to be a little off-putting because to this date, Menners and I have had a great relationship. He's very supportive, he's very loyal, and he encourages myself and others when it comes to our shows on the network. He's never had any criticism towards me. He's never said anything bad about me, at least that I know of. So to not get a heads up about this was just a huge blindside. And, all I really wanted was a DM, an email, a phone call telling me that, hey, maybe you're going a little bit too soft on Gus. You got to hammer him a little bit more. I need you to re-record an episode. And I would have talked to him about it, and I would have been fine with it. Or if he got to a point where he was thinking about putting a new title on the show, maybe he should have talked to me about it first before he took to Twitter. I mean, that's something that I thought, out of respect, he would have done. And, I kind of feel stung in a way that he took this route. Now, I know Menners' MO. He's going to make fun of me. He's going to call me a baby. He's going to call me a pussy. This is what he does with everybody else. So I expect to get that fury from him. And that's fine. That's the way he copes. That's the way he processes things. And, he can say whatever he wants. It's no skin off of my back. But I really wish that he didn't have that superiority complex with me, because I've never treated him with anything other than respect. And that's all I really wanted from him at the end of the day. Just be proactive with me. And you could do whatever you want with this show going forward. He could have suspended me for a week and I would have been fine with it. But this is the road that he wants to take, and I'll have to accept whatever he decides. Now, just because the show may have a new title doesn't mean that we're not going to call it the Consistency Podcast. We're going to be TCP going forward, and that's not going to change in any of my recordings. And, that's just going to be the way I'm going to handle things. But I really think that Menners could have handled it a little bit better with me, especially because he had that issue happen with him recently when people went behind his back and uploaded an episode of KMS Rundown to the network without his knowing about it. He was very disappointed. He was shocked that this happened without him knowing about it. He expressed that to Kirk directly. And I'm not sure if he accepted Kirk's answer or, what he was saying was very truthful, that he was okay with what happened. But that didn't sit well with him. And he voiced that. So I'm doing the same in a diplomatic way, and I'm voicing the fact that he should have been proactive with me, just like he wanted Kirk to be proactive with him. So I hope nothing happens to the title of the show, but we'll see what happens going forward. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about was Mr. Inconsistency himself, Kirk, because he loves to call me Mr. Softy, Soupy Steve, and all these other things. But he does the same things himself. He's very, very inconsistent. On Monday, he was very disappointed in a way that I didn't hammer Gus and light into him or celebrate the fact that he was fired. And as I listened to that episode, with Gus there, by the way, I noticed that Kirk was also being inconsistent. Right up until that firing, Gus was crucified by Kirk. Kirk laid into him something awful. He tore this guy to shreds. He said some things that, really were degrading in a way to Gus. And Kirk was really upset. I mean, to the point that he was saying that this Gus bus thing should be driven off the road and off a cliff. And you could tell that Kirk was really wanting Gus to be fired, but he couldn't pull the trigger on it. He was trying to get him to quit. I mean, he was trying to come up with every single scenario, and he was doing so being very upset and frustrated. And then on Sunday, he finally pulled the trigger and he got rid of him. So when Monday came around, you kind of expected Kirk to still be upset, to try to process what happened through the show. And what we got was Mr. Sunshine and Rainbows, Mr. Happy-Go-Lucky. He was hyping Gus up, complimenting him, speaking well of him. I mean, Kirk did everything but fillet this guy on the air on Monday. And I was trying to, stop myself from wanting to puke because it was just inconsistent with the way that Kirk was talking 2 days earlier. And what I don't get is that he wants to poke the fingers at me, saying that I'm soft, but that's what he's doing. That's classic Kirk. It's Kirky bits. It's what he does best. And yet he'll fire shots at me knowing that he's doing the same thing. And now, what is Kirk doing? He's giving Gus responsibilities for the show going forward. I mean, what the hell is he doing? He's giving Gus the responsibility of the 2024 Best Of after he totally obliterated 2023 Best Of. Does Kirk really think that Gus is going to do anything with this thing? He has a history of lying, being lazy, breaking promises. So you think that this kid having a full year to prepare the Best Of is going to do a good job with it? You crucified this kid. You said he was a horrible producer, and now you're giving him tasks for your show? Is it me, or didn't you fire this guy? When you fire a person, that's it. You break the relationship. You move on. You don't give him tasks. You don't hype him up. You don't talk nice about him. He sabotaged the show. And now you're going to give him responsibilities? But I'm Mr. Softy. Again, Kirk has a history of being inconsistent. But what he loves to do best is point the fingers at others when that finger should be pointed to himself. So I really hope Kirk stops calling me Mr. Softy or Soupy Steve, because he really should be saying these things about himself, because if there is one person who is being very inconsistent, it's him. I, from day one, laid into Gus. I put the bug in a lot of people's ears that he should not have been the producer of this show. And over the course of 3 months, people were realizing that he wasn't a good fit. He wanted us to believe that he was the next Jackie the Joke Man from the Howard Stern show. And what we got was Elegant Elliot Offen. He was a person that hyped himself up. He had all these promises that didn't come true. He only talked about himself. And he did it to himself. He got himself fired. He had the greatest lottery ticket, and he flushed it down the drain. So I laid off of him because I knew he self-destructed himself. But for the most part, I was as consistent can be. And I was right as rain about Gus. So for Kirk to not acknowledge that, but to continue to call me Mr. Softy, again, it just doesn't make any sense. But with what's been going on with Menners and Kirk, I don't think anything makes sense anymore. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up episode 18, and we'll see what's going on with episode 19. What the name of the show is going to be, who knows? But I'll talk to you soon. And like I said, if you want to be on the Consistency Podcast, reach out. I'd love to hear from you. And hopefully Mutt accepts this invitation. With that said, I'll talk to you soon.